Most of us drift through life as if moving through a haze, mistaking shadows for substance, dreams for reality. We wake in the morning, go about our routines, and imagine that the world we see is solid, fixed and certain. Yet beneath the surface, something deeper stirs a faint sense that things aren't quite as they seem. It's as if we're sleepwalking, unaware that the script we're following isn't one we consciously chose. This dream isn't the kind that comes to us at night. It's woven into the fabric of our daily lives. We dream of identities, of success, of purpose, but these dreams are built on borrowed ideas. They come from the stories we've been told by our parents, by society, by the endless hum of culture shaping us from the moment we first opened our eyes. These stories tell us what to value, how to think, and who to become, and we believe them without question, as if they were absolute truths. But a dream is slippery, isn't it? It's always changing, always just out of reach. We chase happiness as if it's something to capture, something waiting at the end of a road called someday. We believe we're making progress, moving forward, climbing the ladder. But what if the ladder is leaning against the wrong wall? What if the race we're running has no finish line? The illusion becomes even more convincing because everyone around us seems to be dreaming the same dream. When the world agrees on what's important, it's easy to forget to ask, is this real? Is this true? Like actors in a play, we take our roles seriously, forgetting that the stage itself is temporary. And so we live not in the world as it is, but in a world of concepts, judgments, and expectations, a constructed reality that keeps us spinning in circles. The deeper irony is that this dream isn't imposed upon us entirely from the outside. We sustain it ourselves, feeding it with our fears, our desires, our endless attempts to control and define. We cling to the familiar, even if it limits us, because waking up feels uncertain, even frightening. Yet the dream is only as powerful as the attention we give it. And so life passes, not as a vivid, direct experience, but as a filtered projection of thoughts, beliefs, and assumptions. We don't see the world, we see our ideas about it. We don't meet life as it is, we meet it through the lens of who we think we are. And the dream persists, not because it is real, but because we have forgotten to question it. From the moment we are born, stories begin to shape us. Long before we can understand words, they are woven around us, forming the foundation of how we see the world and our place in it. These stories are not merely told, they are absorbed, passed down through the tone of a parent's voice, the structure of language, and the quiet assumptions baked into everyday life. They become the air we breathe, so natural and all-encompassing that we rarely pause to notice them. We are told who we are, our name, our family, our culture, and through these stories we learn what is expected of us. This is what good people do. This is how you succeed. This is what life is all about. These narratives give us a framework to navigate the world, but they also create boundaries, often defining not just what we can do, but who we believe we can become. The power of these stories lies in their invisibility. They are so deeply embedded in our minds that we mistake them for reality. A child might hear, "You're not good at this," and carry that story into adulthood, allowing it to shape their choices and limit their potential. Similarly, entire societies are built on collective stories of progress, of justice, of power that dictate how we organize ourselves and what we value. These stories are not inherently good or bad, they simply are. They provide meaning, but they also create illusions. Consider how a story can turn something intangible into a force that drives entire lives of belief in money, for example, or in success. Money, at its core, is a shared agreement, a story we all participate in. Yet people spend their lives chasing it as if it were the source of their worth. What makes stories so potent is their ability to bypass reason and embed themselves in emotion. A single narrative can inspire someone to greatness or trap them in fear. We see this in the way history is told, how media frames events, and how personal myths evolve. Stories don't just explain, they define. And over time we internalize them, mistaking their structures for the truth. But there is a curious paradox. While stories can liberate, they can also confine. We tell ourselves, "I must follow this path," or "this is who I am," and in doing so, we close off the infinite possibilities of what could be. The story becomes the boundary, and we live within its lines, rarely questioning whether it serves us anymore. The true power of stories lies in our ability to rewrite them. Once we recognize that they are not fixed, that they are creations rather than facts, we can begin to examine them with fresh eyes. We can ask, who wrote this story? Do I still believe it? And what new story might I tell instead? In doing so, we reclaim our freedom, stepping beyond the narratives we inherited to create something entirely our own. From the moment we enter the world, we are shaped by the invisible forces of cultural conditioning. It begins so early, so subtly, that we scarcely notice it happening. We are born into a society with its own set of rules, values, and expectations, and these are handed to us like a script we're expected to follow. Without questioning, we absorb them, shaping our thoughts, our behaviors, and even our sense of self. It comes to us in countless ways through the words our parents use, the rituals they follow, the lessons they teach, and the stories they share. They may not explicitly say, "This is how the world works." But the messages are there in the way they treat others, the way they react to success or failure, and the way they frame what is possible and what is not. Over time, we begin to internalize these messages, accepting them as truth rather than seeing them for what they are, constructs of the culture we were born into. This conditioning extends far beyond the home. As we grow, we encounter schools, communities, media, and religion, each reinforcing certain ideas about who we should be and how we should behave. We learn what is considered normal and what is not. We are taught to fit in, to play our part, to conform to the invisible mold that society has created. And while these structures can provide a sense of order and belonging, they can also limit us, creating a narrow path that we feel compelled to walk. Cultural conditioning shapes how we see success and failure, often tying our worth to external achievements or social approval. It defines our relationship with time, teaching us to view life as a race against the clock, always striving for the next goal. It even influences our understanding of happiness, often equating it with material wealth, status, or consumption. In this way, cultural norms can act like invisible chains, holding us back from exploring life's deeper dimensions. The effects are so pervasive that we rarely stop to question them. We grow up believing in certain hierarchies, certain roles, and certain truths because they are so widely accepted. But these beliefs are not universal. They are the product of a specific time, place, and context. What one culture views as virtuous, another might see as taboo. What one society praises as progress, another might mourn as loss. And yet, despite its constraints, cultural conditioning also offers us an opportunity. By understanding how deeply it shapes us, we can begin to see where it serves us and where it does not. Recognizing the patterns allows us to question them, to choose which ones we wish to keep and which ones we are ready to let go. It's not about rejecting culture entirely, but about engaging with it consciously, understanding that we are not its passive recipients, but its active participants. The moment we step back and observe the conditioning at work, a space opens. In that space, we find the freedom to explore who we truly are beyond the expectations and assumptions we've inherited. And in doing so, we begin to transform not only ourselves, but also the culture we are part of. The enchantment of cultural conditioning is not loud or obvious. It works subtly, quietly weaving itself into the fabric of our everyday lives. It doesn't announce itself as a force or a presence. Instead, it slips in unnoticed, disguising itself as the natural order of things. We don't even realize we've been enchanted because the spell has no beginning. It starts before we are even aware that a spell exists. This enchantment is built on repetition, on the slow, steady layering of ideas over time. A word here, a gesture there, a tradition repeated year after year. We see the world around us behaving in a certain way, valuing certain things, and naturally we assume that this is the way things are supposed to be. The enchantment takes hold not through force, but through familiarity, through the comforting rhythm of the expected. What makes it so powerful is its seamlessness. It doesn't feel like we've been taught to think a certain way. It feels like our thoughts arise naturally, like they're our own. The enchantment becomes the lens through which we view the world, shaping our beliefs, our desires, and even our sense of identity. But because it's always been there, we rarely think to question it. It becomes invisible, and in its invisibility, it becomes nearly unbreakable. This is not the enchantment of a sudden magical spell. It is the slow, patient work of ideas embedding themselves into the unconscious. It whispers, "This is how things are. It convinces us that life is a series of tasks to complete, that happiness is something to achieve rather than something to feel, that we are separate from the world around us. And because these ideas feel so natural, we rarely stop to ask whether they're true. The subtlety of this enchantment is what makes it so enduring. If it were blatant, we might resist it. If someone told us outright, you must live your life this way, we might rebel. But when the enchantment feels like our own choice, like the result of our own reasoning, we embrace it. It doesn't force us to conform, it gently guides us until conformity feels like freedom. Even the moments when we sense something is off, those fleeting feelings of discontent or longing are often swept away by the enchantment. It tells us that the problem isn't the system, it's us. Work harder, it says. Try more, buy more. Be better, it keeps us striving, distracted, always reaching for a solution that lies just out of reach. And so the enchantment continues, not through deception, but through a quiet persistence that lulls us back to sleep. But here's the paradox: the enchantment is not unbreakable. Its power lies in its subtlety, but its weakness lies there too. The moment we begin to notice it, the spell starts to fray. The moment we pause and ask, why do I think this? Where did this belief come from? The illusion begins to crumble. It cannot withstand awareness because awareness is the one thing it was designed to avoid. The most intriguing part of the illusion we live under is that it isn't entirely imposed upon us. While cultural norms, societal expectations, and external influences play their roles, the truth is that much of the spell is one we cast upon ourselves. It is a spell born of our own participation, our own attachment to ideas, and our own unquestioned beliefs. From a young age, we begin to take the fragments of what we hear, see, and feel and weave them into a story about who we are. We gather the labels others give us: smart, shy, stubborn, kind, and fold them into an identity. We pick up fears from fleeting moments of failure, desires from fleeting moments of praise, and use these scattered pieces to form a picture of ourselves. Over time, this picture solidifies into what we call me, and we believe it to be the whole truth of who we are. But here's the subtlety of the spell: this self-created identity is not static, nor is it entirely real. It is a collection of thoughts and ideas, assumptions and projections, a mental construct that feels solid only because we give it constant attention. We tell ourselves, this is what I'm good at, this is what I fear, this is what I need, and with each repetition, the spell strengthens. It becomes a loop, a story we believe so deeply that it shapes the way we experience the world. Yet this construct is full of limits we impose upon ourselves. We say, I could never do that, or that's just not who I am, without realizing these boundaries were drawn by our own hands. The spell creates a cage, not out of malice, but out of habit, as we cling to the familiar shapes of who we think we should be. Even our aspirations are often dictated by this construct, chasing goals that fit neatly into the story we've written about ourselves, rather than questioning whether the story is worth telling in the first place. And here's the curious thing: we defend the spell even when it restricts us. We cling to it because it gives us a sense of certainty, of control. The idea of stepping outside this self-created identity can feel terrifying, as if losing the spell would mean losing ourselves. But that fear is part of the illusion. We are not the spell, we are the ones who cast it. The spell also extends to how we see the world around us. We project our beliefs onto people, situations, and possibilities, shaping them to fit the narrative we've already decided upon. If we believe the world is a hostile place, we notice only hostility. If we believe we are unworthy, we find evidence of our unworthiness everywhere. The spell feeds itself, turning perception into confirmation until it feels unbreakable. But its power lies not in its truth, but in our belief in it. The moment we pause and observe the stories we tell ourselves, the spell begins to unravel. We see that the identity we cling to is just that: a story, a construct, a reflection of ideas we've collected along the way. And when we let go of the need to define ourselves so rigidly, we begin to glimpse the vastness of who we truly are beyond the spell we've created. The illusion we live in is so seamless, so woven into the very fabric of our existence, that we seldom recognize it for what it is. It is not a blatant lie or a jarring deception. Instead, it is a subtle merging of reality and perception, a blending so perfect that we no longer see the difference. We experience life not as it truly is, but through a lens crafted from our beliefs, assumptions, and past experiences. This illusion is so smooth, so fluid, that we mistake it for the world itself. It operates quietly in the background, shaping how we respond to everything from the people we meet to the choices we make. From the moment we wake up, we slip into the familiar patterns of thought and action, and each day feels like a continuation of the last. The world around us becomes predictable, and we fall into a comfortable rhythm, assuming that what we see, hear, and feel is all there is to reality. Yet this reality is a construct, one built from years of conditioning and past experiences, and it is all we know. The more we move through it, the more we affirm its reality, until it feels like the only possible way to exist. The illusion isn't a rigid, fixed thing, it's malleable, constantly shifting to accommodate our perceptions. It wraps itself around our ideas of self, of success, of meaning, and it persuades us that this is the only way the world can work. When we experience something, we interpret it through the filters of our expectations and beliefs, seeing only what we are ready to see. This creates a reality that feels solid, that feels real, yet it is based on nothing more than perception. We rarely question the seamlessness of this illusion. We don't stop to ask, is this truly the way things are? Instead, we live within its contours, reacting to life as if it were inherently defined, as if the way we understand it is the only way it can be understood. When something disrupts this illusion, when an unexpected event or an unfamiliar perspective shakes us from our habitual thinking, we often feel discomfort, as though something is wrong, but the discomfort itself reveals just how entrenched we are in the smoothness of the illusion. It's not the world that has changed, it's our perception of it. And yet the illusion is not necessarily harmful. It allows us to function in the world, to make sense of our daily lives, to navigate through the complexities of social and personal existence. But the danger lies in mistaking the illusion for reality. When we become too attached to the familiar patterns, when we stop questioning the filters through which we view the world, we trap ourselves in a narrow, one-dimensional experience. The richness of life becomes obscured, and we fail to see the vastness that lies just beyond our habitual thinking. The seamlessness of the illusion is what makes it so powerful it feels effortless, like it's simply the way things are. But beneath that surface, there is a deeper truth waiting to be recognized. The moment we step back, the moment we pause and truly look at the world as it is, without the filters of expectation, we begin to see the edges of the illusion. We start to notice the cracks, the spaces where something else, something more expansive, more authentic can enter. But until we challenge this seamlessness, until we look beyond the familiar patterns, the illusion will continue to guide us, shaping our experience in ways we may never fully understand. From the moment we begin to understand ourselves as individuals, we are handed a set of definitions. These definitions don't come from a deep understanding of our true nature, but are shaped by external forces, family, culture, peers, media, and even our own projections. We are told in subtle ways who we are, what we should be, and how we should fit into the world. We are handed labels like shy, outgoing, intelligent, creative, and countless others, and we begin to wear them like identities we think are fixed, as if they are an inherent part of who we are. But these definitions are often nothing more than temporary constructs, illusory markers created by societal expectations and personal experiences. They are not truths, they are merely stories that we come to believe and identify with. We internalize them, building our sense of self around these borrowed notions. The shy child grows up to believe they are timid, while the confident one assumes that confidence defines their character. Over time, these labels become the prison we live in, the boundaries that confine our sense of self. We think we know who we are because we've been taught to think in certain terms, but those terms are limited, narrow, and often far from the full scope of who we truly are. These definitions lock us into roles, and the more we identify with them, the harder it becomes to imagine life outside those boundaries. We become prisoners of our own making, prisoners of the boxes we've been placed in. The creative person may fear failure because they've been taught that creativity equals success, while the intellectual may avoid emotional expression because they've been told intellect is the true measure of worth. These false definitions of self dictate how we live, how we make choices, and how we interact with the world, all the while narrowing our possibilities. What makes these definitions so powerful is that they feel authentic. We wear them so naturally that we forget they are not who we are, but who we have been conditioned to think we are. We start to think we are defined by our successes and failures, our abilities and shortcomings. If we fail, we believe we are failures. If we succeed, we believe we are worthy. We become attached to these fleeting notions, clinging to them as if they were our true essence, but in reality they are just passing moments, temporary states of being that are subject to change. This attachment to false definitions also keeps us from exploring the full potential of who we are. We get stuck in the roles we've created, and we avoid exploring new aspects of ourselves because we believe we have already figured it out. The shy person might never discover their natural leadership abilities because they have defined themselves as shy. The outspoken person might never listen deeply to others because they have defined themselves by their voice. These self-imposed limits keep us confined to a narrow slice of our potential. The truth, however, is that these definitions are not permanent. They are fluid, constantly shifting, influenced by context, perspective, and the stories we tell ourselves. The moment we stop believing that we are confined by any single label or definition, we open up to the vastness of who we are. We are not one thing, we are a tapestry of experiences, a constantly evolving flow of thoughts, feelings, and potential. By releasing our attachment to false definitions, we can begin to experience ourselves as we truly are, dynamic, ever-changing, and limitless. Unquestioned beliefs shape the way we move through the world, often without us even realizing their influence. These beliefs are like invisible currents in the ocean of our minds, guiding us, pushing us in certain directions, and shaping our choices. They are formed early in life, often handed down by the environment around us, parents, teachers, peers, culture, and society, and they become so deeply ingrained that we no longer even question their validity. We simply accept them as truths, as givens, and from that point on, they influence nearly every aspect of our lives. These beliefs aren't always obvious. They are often subtle assumptions we hold about ourselves, others, and the world. For example, we might believe that success equals wealth, or that love must come with sacrifice, or that our worth is measured by how much we achieve. We hold on to these beliefs so tightly that we cease to see them as beliefs at all. They become part of the fabric of our reality, so woven into our thinking that we forget they are constructs, interpretations, and not inherent truths. The danger of unquestioned beliefs is that they narrow our understanding. When we accept something as unquestionable, we stop exploring alternatives. We stop asking, why do I believe this? And instead, we allow these beliefs to dictate our decisions, often in ways that limit us. For instance, the belief that failure is something to be avoided at all costs might cause someone to stay in a job they dislike, or avoid pursuing a dream out of fear of the social stigma or personal disappointment associated with not succeeding. Similarly, a belief that certain people are not capable of change might lead to rigid judgments, preventing growth in both ourselves and others. These beliefs also prevent us from seeing the fluidity of life as they create fixed patterns of thinking. If we believe that life is a competition, we view everything, relationships, careers, and even our own inner growth, as something that must be won or lost. We cease to see the rich complexity of human experience and instead reduce everything to a series of binary outcomes. We are constantly measuring and comparing ourselves to a standard that may not even align with our true values or desires, and in doing so, we miss the deeper, subtler opportunities for connection, peace, and understanding that exist beyond those metrics. Even more insidiously, these unquestioned beliefs are often projected onto the world. We take our own assumptions about life and impose them on others. We may believe that people must act a certain way, conform to certain norms, or achieve certain goals to be worthy, and we then expect the world to behave in alignment with that belief. This limits not only how we see others, but how we see ourselves. By measuring ourselves against an often arbitrary standard, we may feel inadequate when we fall short of an external benchmark, failing to recognize that the very foundation of that benchmark is shaky and unexamined. The unchallenged nature of these beliefs creates an illusion of certainty. They make life seem predictable, manageable, and even controllable. But in reality, life is far more fluid and expansive than these beliefs allow us to see. When we begin to question these deeply held assumptions, we start to see the cracks in the foundation. We begin to realize that many of these beliefs were never based on reality. They were simply inherited frameworks we chose to accept as truth. By recognizing them for what they are, temporary, conditional, and subjective, we can begin to free ourselves from their grip. This freedom comes from the simple act of questioning. When we ask, is this really true, we open up a space where new possibilities can emerge. We start to see the world not as a rigid system of beliefs, but as a dynamic, ever-changing experience. We realize that we are not bound to any fixed idea of who we are, what we must do, or how things must be. And in that space of questioning, we find the freedom to explore, to grow, and to live with a deeper sense of authenticity, no longer constrained by the unquestioned beliefs that once governed us. There is a profound disconnect that runs through the core of our lives, a gap between the way we experience the world and the way we think the world should be. This disconnect is not just intellectual, but deeply felt. It's a sensation of being out of sync with the rhythm of life, of living in a world that feels both familiar and alien, as though we are constantly reaching for something we can't quite grasp. The disconnect is not merely about external circumstances. It runs deep into how we view ourselves, how we interact with others, and how we relate to the universe as a whole. At the root of this disconnect is the false belief that we are separate from everything around us. We walk through life thinking we are distinct, isolated individuals, cut off from the larger flow of existence. We are taught to see ourselves as separate from nature, from others, and even from our own inner experience. This separation creates a rift between the self and the world, between the mind and the body, between our desires and the reality of our existence. And in this space of separation, we begin to feel lost, disconnected, as if the life we are living is not quite our own, as if we are playing a role rather than fully participating in the experience of being alive. This sense of separation is reinforced by the very structures we live within. Our education, our work, our culture, all these systems emphasize individualism and competition, promoting the idea that we are separate from one another, that we must strive to prove our worth in isolation. We are taught to view ourselves as isolated points of consciousness, disconnected from the interwoven web of life. We are taught to define ourselves by what we do, by what we own, and by how others perceive us, creating an external standard for internal validation. This constant striving to meet external measures leads us to feel disconnected from our authentic selves, from the deeper, more fluid parts of who we are. But it isn't just a separation between individuals, it's a separation from the world itself. We act as though the earth, the air, the water, and the animals exist independently of us, as if we are merely passing through a landscape rather than being integral to it. This disconnect manifests in the way we consume resources, in how we treat the environment, and in our disconnection from the natural world. We see ourselves as masters of nature rather than as a part of it, and this disconnection leads to a fractured relationship with the world, where our actions often harm rather than nurture. Moreover, this disconnect shows up in how we relate to our own inner experiences. We become estranged from our feelings, our bodies, and even our thoughts. We spend so much time trying to control and manage our emotions, often labeling them as distractions or weaknesses, that we forget they are a vital part of our humanity. We live in our heads, disconnected from the wisdom of the body, ignoring the subtle signals it gives us about what is truly needed. This creates a split, a division within ourselves, where we cease to trust our own experience and instead seek validation from external sources, constantly looking outward for answers that can only be found within. Even in our relationships, the disconnect is palpable. We are taught to love in ways that are transactional. I will love you if you love me, or I will give this to you if you give me that in return. We have come to see relationships as exchanges rather than as the flow of shared experience. This transactional approach leads us to misunderstand love, intimacy, and connection. We build walls around ourselves to protect against hurt, and in doing so, we inadvertently create further separation. We become afraid to truly connect, to let others in, because we've lost the ability to see beyond our own fears and needs. The ultimate result of this disconnect is that we lose our sense of belonging not only to the world around us, but to ourselves. We forget that we are part of a larger whole, that we are not isolated, but interconnected with every other being, every other experience. This sense of disconnection leads to feelings of emptiness, of longing for something we cannot name. We feel like we are living on the periphery, disconnected from the very essence of life itself. However, when we begin to recognize this disconnect, when we start to see it for what it is, a product of our beliefs, our conditioning, and our blind adherence to separation, we can begin to close the gap. The first step is to notice how we view ourselves in the world. Are we operating from a place of separation or from a place of connection? As we begin to dissolve the illusion of separateness, we can start to experience life as a continuous flow where we are not isolated points, but expressions of a deeper, interconnected whole. In this recognition, the disconnect begins to fade, and we start to feel fully present, fully alive, in harmony with both the world around us and the truth within us. There is a quiet power lying dormant within all of us, waiting to be recognized and awakened. It is not a power that needs to be earned, nor one that must be cultivated through force or struggle. It is a natural potential intrinsic to who we are that exists beneath the layers of conditioning, fear, and distraction. It is the potential to live fully, to embrace life in all its complexity and richness, and to express our true selves without limitation. Yet for most of us, this potential lies untapped, obscured by the false narratives we hold about who we are and what we are capable of. The first step in awakening this potential is to recognize that it is already within us. We are not waiting to become something more, we are waiting to remember who we truly are. From an early age, we are taught to see ourselves as separate from our potential, as though it is something distant or external. We are conditioned to look outside ourselves for validation, for answers, and for the measures of success that define our worth. But the truth is, everything we need to unlock our potential is already here. The skills, the wisdom, the strength, all of it exists within, buried beneath the layers of doubt and expectation. But why is it so difficult to access? Why do so many of us feel as though we are not living up to our fullest potential? Part of the reason lies in the stories we tell ourselves. From childhood, we are fed narratives about what is possible for us and what is not. We are told what we can achieve and what is out of our reach, often based on our circumstances, our appearance, or our background. We internalize these stories, accepting them as truths, and they begin to shape our self-image and our limitations. We become prisoners of our own beliefs, trapped in the narratives of who we think we are and what we think we can do. These beliefs are not our true nature. They are the products of societal conditioning, of cultural norms, and of expectations handed down to us. The potential we seek is not something that can be found by adhering to these external definitions. It is not something that can be achieved by meeting the expectations of others. Instead, it is a process of self-discovery, of unlearning the false assumptions we have made about ourselves. When we begin to see beyond the stories we have been told, we start to recognize the vastness of our own being. We see that our true potential is not limited by the stories we have inherited, but that it is as limitless as the universe itself. Awakening this potential requires us to embrace the present moment. Too often we look to the future for our fulfillment, believing that one day we will finally be enough, or that one day we will have the perfect circumstances to live fully. But the truth is, the key to awakening our potential is right here, in the present. It is in our willingness to show up fully, to be present with what is, without the need to constantly seek or strive. In the stillness of the present, our potential reveals itself not as something distant or unattainable, but as something that is already unfolding, just waiting for us to recognize it. This recognition often begins with a shift in perspective. We start to see life not as a series of obstacles or challenges to overcome, but as a field of possibility. Every moment becomes an opportunity to express more of who we truly are. The potential is not something that we need to attain through effort, but something that can be revealed through presence, awareness, and the willingness to step into our own truth. It is about shedding the false layers of doubt and fear that have been placed upon us and opening up to the natural flow of life. This awakening is not a single event, but a gradual unfolding. It is a process of peeling back the layers, of clearing away the conditioning and self-doubt that have kept us in the shadows. As we awaken to our potential, we begin to feel more aligned with our true selves, more in harmony with the world around us. We stop measuring ourselves against external standards and instead begin to see life as a creative expression, a constant opportunity to expand, to grow, and to experience the fullness of being. To awaken this potential, we must learn to trust ourselves. We must trust that we are capable, that we have the wisdom, the strength, and the creativity to navigate the world. We must trust that the desires we feel are not random, but are signals pointing us toward our deepest truth. And most importantly, we must trust that we are enough, exactly as we are right now. This trust is the key that unlocks the door to our potential. And once we open it, we step into a world of endless possibility. The awakening of this potential is not a destination, but a journey that is already unfolding, the moment we choose to see it. Every step we take in the direction of truth, authenticity, and presence is a step toward realizing the full extent of our potential. It is a journey that invites us to embrace who we are without fear, without limitation, and to live the life we are meant to live fully and freely. In the end, the awakening of our true potential is a continuous journey, one that invites us to strip away the false narratives and beliefs we have been conditioned to accept. It calls us to see beyond the illusions of separation, success, and limitation, and to recognize the boundless nature of who we truly are. This awakening does not require us to become something we are not. Rather, it asks us to return to the truth of our being, to embrace the present moment, and to trust in the wisdom and strength that already reside within us. When we let go of the stories that confine us, we step into a life full of possibility, one where we are not defined by external standards, but by our ability to express our unique essence. The potential we seek is not somewhere out there, waiting to be found. It is within us, already unfolding, ready to be recognized and lived. All that is required is the willingness to see it and the courage to embrace it fully. In doing so, we come home to ourselves, to the truth of our existence, and to a life of deep fulfillment and limitless possibility.